Hello everyone, it's great to be here and to start this presentation. So I'm Dr. Flavia Santos, I'm a UCD Adastro Fellow and Assistant Professor at the School of Psychology, and I will present parts of the theoretical paper I wrote about nervousness around numbers and how it steers students away from STEM. It's under the Arithmos project, the project that I have funded by the Irish Research Council. Today I will not show results of this project as the research piece, but I will explain other aspects. And so thank you very much for having me, and let's start. So the outline of this talk is the impact of maths anxiety on maths performance, the importance of identifying vulnerable groups, and recommendations to deal with maths anxiety. So that's what we will explore today. We know that mathematics is present, at least recognized, since 3,000 years before Common Era, and it is present in Eastern cultures and Western cultures, but it was always associated with political power, economical power, and developments and technology somehow. In our time, it's not different. So nowadays we have from satellites to robotic surgeries, and we can so easily or simply say that mathematics can save lives and time, and mathematics brings progress and justice. However, when we think about something like this, we rarely think about primary schools. And turns out that, let's say, everything starts there. So it's very important to focus our attention to primary school. In fact, in our societies, not just in Ireland, but in overall, what we see is that we start to think about education and development and discoveries when we have adolescents thinking of their next step, when they are choosing their careers. So here I bring data from the PISA study organized by the OECD, and this includes all editions from 2000 to 2018 in the three areas that they measure the performance of adolescents. So reading, mathematics, and science. And the blue line represents the average score of the OECD countries, so all countries together. So usually it's near to 500 points in each one of the areas. And by looking at this graphic, we could say something very nice, that Ireland is doing very well, because we have reading above average, science above average, and mathematics on average. So by this, we could just finish, just keep eating and go home. However, it's not in this way. Turns out that when you measure it, the average is also split in different levels. So we do have countries in the level 6, but the average score of Ireland's level 3. And in fact, 84% of Irish students are in the level 2, which means that a very small portion is making the average going up. Okay, so this is important. So some researchers were trying to explain why is this happening. And one of the possible explanations is maths anxiety. And this paper was published by Foley and colleagues, and it shows data from the OECD. So this is the plot from the PISA 2012. And here we see on the horizontal axis maths anxiety, on the vertical axis maths scores, and each one of the blue diamonds represents a different country. Just to make it easier, I put the flag here so you can find Ireland quickly. So one important aspect is we see, really, like I said before, some countries with more than 500 points, like China in all areas, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Macau, Taipei, etc. Singapore as well, and Japan are in the top level. And then we see another trend here, which is that line is indicating for us, which represents the scores in maths anxiety. So we see here that countries in the middle or in the left side, they are usually developed countries, so just by reading the names. And if you're looking at the right side, you see developing countries like Brazil, Argentina, Tunisia, and others. So it means that apparently poverty has something to do with maths anxiety, because the higher scores of maths anxiety, the lower are the economical status of those countries especially. Another thing that I would like to mention in this slide is that right now, those individuals which were plotted here, they are 25 years old. So it means that or they are finishing their careers or they are starting in the marketplace. So it means that we are talking about a real problem for our real society. So let's think about what's coming next. So here I'm showing data from the PISA 2018, so the most recent edition. And every edition they change the questions. So they are not asking about math anxiety directly this time, but I select here two questions from what they are calling well-being and growth mindset. And in those two questions on the right side, you see one is the students must say when they fail, they worry about what others think about them. Or intelligence is something that I cannot change. So if it's something that you cannot change, why bother? Why keep studying? Why making an effort? Okay, so that's what is in their minds right now. And my question is, from where is this coming from? And I'm not I'm not a psychoanalyst, but unfortunately, must say, let's talk about mothers. So here we see data from the Growing Up in Ireland, first wave, child cohorts, and this data plotted here is maths scores of 9 years old children, and the sample size is 8,417 children. And those bars are representing the different quintiles. So on the left side, you see first quintile. On the right side, you see the fifth quintile. And what is the tendency here? In the first quintile, you see students with lowest scores in mathematics. In the fifth quintile, you see students with the highest scores in mathematics. However, if we just focus on the fifth percentile, something interesting is happening here. Although all of them are excellent students, when the mothers should rate their capacity, their ability, they have options like poor, average, above average, and excellent. Only 36% of the cases were rated for girls as excellent. And in contrast, boys, around 50% of the cases, mothers were rating them as excellent. So that's something intriguing me. And then we could say, okay, that's a family issue. Let's see what happened at the school. Turns out that exactly the same trend is there. So it means that teachers also are rating girls less girls with very high capacity as above average. Okay, and another aspect that I believe is important to inform here is that 86% of the teachers were women. Okay, so now that we understand a little bit what's ongoing in Ireland, let's focus on the concept. So what is maths anxiety, at least considering what we know? So first of all, we can say that it's a feeling of tension that interferes with manipulation of numbers and solving mathematical problems. And it happens, of course, in academic activities, but also in ordinary life. So you can imagine a child that's playing with other kids and feels anxious about numbers or quantities or anything that needs to organize, divide, and see patterns and so on. Or when they are helping parents in home activities. So those feelings of tension, apprehension, and fear towards mathematics, they are weakly related to intelligence. And this is very important because in our society, if you are not doing well, you probably are not simply smart enough. Okay, so that's an important perspective that we should have in mind. The other aspect that's intriguing is that recently It was published this paper by a very respected research group saying that maths anxiety meets all criteria for phobia, specific phobia. So in other ways, we are saying that maths anxiety is equivalent to have the fear of spiders or something like that. And what is the implication of it? For the moment, maths anxiety is not in the classification of diseases or in the manual of mental disorders. However, if in some point it goes there, we know that it will influence the way we will approach and treat maths anxiety. And you can imagine that possibly pharmacological approaches will be in place. So, yes.
Can you go back to last slide?
Oh, sorry.
So for ICD, I think there's a category for mental health. Do you think to what extent mathematics actions can be classified in the mental health?
Exactly, that's the point. For the moment, it's not. But precisely, psychiatrists are saying that it meets all criteria for a specific phobia, which means that possibly one day it might be there. Okay, thank you for reinforcing this. Then we see how can we organize or understand maths anxiety. So we see it as a multidimensional. Psychologists love to categorize things, so that's it. So we have cognitive, affective, physiological, and behavioral aspects. So cognitive would include all thoughts like, I don't know this very well, maths is hard, or maths is for genius. So all the thoughts. And then in affective, you include the feelings. So clearly, of course, fear is the number one, but you can put anger, you can put in there a huge frustration, so it would cause maybe a contempt or even disgust about mathematics. And then on behavior, you would see all forms of avoidance that a child could come with. So, for example, asking for toilet breaks, doing the exercises very slowly, just to make sure that they keep on the easy ones, or the time pass and the class is over, and other things, even including misbehavior, just to not use the time to do the activities. But what is important here is that those dimensions will appear in anticipation, during the learning, and during assessment. So it means that the child might not sleep the night before a classroom just thinking that tomorrow I have a maths class. And on the learning, instead of paying attention of numbers and the symbols and the relationship between numbers and symbols, they might be there thinking of, what if the teacher asked me something? So these are the students that are with the head very down just to not be seen in class. And then, of course, assessment is the most easier for us to relate. Any person probably had felt that in some point. I have an exam and I feel uncomfortable, so that's a good example of it. But it means that it's exhausting because it's all the time in there, okay? So here, let's talk about research. So this is a seminal work by Hembry. This still very important nowadays, although we have recent research now. And according to this study, they show us clearly that 6th graders, 12th graders, and post-secondary students, they will show maths anxiety. And it also shows that women will have more anxiety than men, so higher scores or more, higher scores. But nowadays, this systematic review by Barroso and colleagues show us clearly that maths anxiety is present regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, in all continents so far. And what I'm circulating here is that since 1st grade, so I'm talking about those little ones with 6 years old that are already showing maths anxiety. And that was the motivation to write the Polis paper, which is already in the Polis, publicpolicy.ie. So this is the title, and I think the title is also giving a message, so that's why I put here. So a child with maths anxiety might become a parent, or a teacher with maths anxiety, which means that who is teaching the kids right now? Who are the ones teaching kids right now? And it means that those kids will be influenced by their maths anxiety, and consequently, the cycle will repeat and repeat and repeat again. So let's talk about this. We saw the PISA study was very specific, it's a large scale study, but does maths anxiety really hinders maths performance? So we need to understand this. It's slightly complicated. So first of all, in this study they had second graders and third graders, boys and girls with an average age of 8 years old. Those kids performed maths attainment, and in this measurement, they were then divided in 3 groups. So children with specific learning disorder, which is called developmental dyscalculia. So these are the ones who are meeting criteria for disease. Low achievement in maths, which are the ones that are affected due to external factors, for instance, poverty, so has nothing to do with capacity to learn. And then the third group is the ones with typical development in maths, so no difficulties at all. So then those kids were asked to perform a maths anxiety scale, and when they did it, we see clearly that among those who have difficulties with mathematics, there was a higher score in maths anxiety. Okay? And then I'm showing you a second study that did pretty much the same. However, it's impressive because the sample size is larger, almost 2,000 students, and then including primary and secondary schools. And here they see a prevalence of developmental dyscalculia of 5%, which is the same seen in several countries. So it means that in a classroom, 5% of the kids will have real disorder for learning mathematics. And they also saw the same negative correlation, which means the higher is the maths anxiety, the lower is the maths score, and so on, minus 30%. However, this study is very rich because, as you can see in this plot, each one of the dots represent one of the kids. And what we see here is a different pattern that I think it's very important to share with you. So first of all, 78% of children with developmental dyscalculia, which means the ones with lowest score in mathematics, they didn't show high maths anxiety. And then by contrast, when you're looking at students with high scores or average scores in mathematics, they actually showed higher scores in maths anxiety, which are the ones here. So it means that we need to think about it. It's really a real thing, because it turns out that a person that is really capable of doing mathematics is showing this. So it could be that a child maybe just pretending and finding an excuse because maybe the classroom is boring and they don't want to be there or something like that. So that's the question, is it a real thing? So there are scientific studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging, and those studies are showing us something very interesting. So on the top you are seeing students with high maths anxiety, and on the bottom you see students with low maths anxiety. So turns out that they are using their brains differently. So children with high maths anxiety are activating areas related to fear, like the right amygdala or the right hippocampus. So they are activating areas to remember previous negative experiences or areas related to fear. Okay? Differently, children with low maths anxiety, they are using brain areas which are related precisely with calculation. So, like it's the case of the left intraparietal sulcus in the parietal lobe, or the left ventral medial prefrontal cortex. So it means that really something different is happening in their brains. So it's something for us to pay attention. So what are the mechanisms that we know that are happening in this maths anxiety? So first of all, we have lots of external factors. So here we can say parents' math anxiety, parents' high expectations about their capacity of their kids, so putting the kids under pressure, teachers with high math anxiety as well, or even the curriculum or the way they were prepared for teaching, in which they emphasize drills, also providing exams that are very, very difficult for the children. Considering children, we have also their own factors. So one common event could be negative experiences in classroom, and we know that it's for sure because my group had the pleasure to analyze data from the growing up in Ireland, and we could see that students with experiences of bullying, they had an impact on their numeracy and on their literacy. So we know that for sure the climate in classroom could influence it. But there are also some genetic factors which are still under investigation. And finally, gender stereotypes, which are common for children, parents, and teachers. So it's a problem for all of us as a society, by the way. So the consequences of it definitely will be avoidance and distress and math anxiety. But we also see some clear mechanisms like memory interference, as I was saying before, remembering previous negative experiences, or intrusive thoughts, which means that the child will be thinking about negative things rather than performing mathematics. So just to give an idea, if you are trying to do this mental calculation, all of you had learned it at school, so you know the procedures, and you know that there's an addition there, you know that you need to position numbers spatially in the right place, you know what is the order of items that you need to process first and after and so on. So you know how to do that. You just need to use your working memory to keep all those elements in mind while you are performing it. So this is working memory capacity to hold and use information for short periods of time. Now, if we put this in the context of the child, then you start by the fact that the child may not have it fully automatized, which means that for them it requires more attention, more working memory to perform. Okay? But instead of thinking of the relationship between numbers and symbols, they might be thinking of other things like I'm dumb, or Dad will be angry, or peers will laugh. And the common consequence is probably the blanking out, which means even what they know, they will not be able to show. So that's very, very dramatic. So why math anxiety should be a concern for all of us today and in the future? Starting for Ireland, clearly leaving certificate. We know that to decide admission in a university, of course there are other ways, but the main way to enter in a university is precisely maths scores and English scores. So according to this data from the Leaving Certificate from 2015 and 2017, we see that maths H1, which means the students with 90 and 100% of correct responses, those individuals, as we can see in this bar, they have the highest probability to choose a STEM course as first choice. By contrast, you see that the bars are diminishing, and then they start to grow, coincidentally increasing in the English level until getting English H1, which means 90 to 100% of correct responses in English. And here we see that they have the higher is the score in English, the higher is the probability of not choosing a course in STEM. So imagine here, if you have a person with vocation to be a physician, but did not well in mathematics, this person will not be a physician. So that's the severity of what we are talking about here. Another reason to consider this aspect is that math anxiety in undergraduate students then. So they measured math anxiety in the first year and did a follow-up considering grades and considering the courses they were choosing in this period. And turns out that students with maths anxiety uniquely accounted for 10% of reduction in the proportion of STEM courses. So the students were avoiding courses in STEM. Okay? And then among those who actually did some courses in STEM, maths anxiety uniquely accounted for 2.4 points in the reduction of their grades. Okay, and this is very important to see in the title, independently of maths abilities. Of course, it was controlled in this study. So that's really serious. And then it gets even worse. I select here data from, I found this image is from Twitter. I have the link. But then I searched for the article by Marshman. And in this article published on Nature, I took this sentence because I think it's very clear. By the end of the university introductory physics classes, women who received A grades tended to have the same level of confidence in their abilities as did men with C grades. So I don't need to say nothing else except to this. In this graph, we have these 4 lines, each line representing a different group. So I want you to pay attention just to the blue-greenish one, this one. So this line represents women who dropped a STEM major. It turns out they had higher grades in comparison to men in the overall GPA and the STEM GPA. So we are really talking about careers that are being destroyed. So we really need to think about this. So now the last theoretical topic I want to explore here is, can maths teachers present maths anxiety? Of course, we have an idea already that it is the case, but now I show you evidence. So the same systematic review by Barroso and colleagues, they contrasted pre-service practicing teacher samples in comparison with non-teacher samples. And again, there was no statistical significant difference, which means that teachers really can have maths anxiety. And why is this important? Because primary school teachers that show high maths anxiety, they spend less time on maths instruction. Let's say they speak very fast to just, again, avoid it. They have lower levels of students' participation in maths activities in their classrooms. They have students with lower maths achievement. So that's very important. But I'm not just thinking of the child, I'm also thinking about the professional. So teachers' well-being is also at stake. So we might see a risk for for impact on their affect, so higher risk for depression and anxiety and other symptoms. Experience of burnout, because they are always trying harder and harder, because we are never here saying that they are not dedicated and competent professionals. We are saying that circumstances are disrupting their work, so their job satisfaction might be compromised, and also their self-efficacy while preparing and while teaching those classes. So overall, I said that maths anxiety is transgenerational, present in early childhood, shaped by culture, and may continue throughout life. So based on this, I will stop talking about theory. I just bring here one reference, because I think it's important to give something that summarizes different approaches, and this study is very critical about what we know and what we don't know about maths anxiety. So I think it's a good recommendation. And then what we can do. So I'm already finishing. So what we can do about maths anxiety. And if I don't have more your attention, I would ask you just to consider this. Has to be an action that targets children, teachers, and parents. If you are working with only one of these groups, you will not be successful or not entirely successful. So one example is the Arrhythmus project, which is the research I'm running right now. So it's funded by the Irish Research Council. It's a COLAS grant. So we have, so UCD and I have a partner from Technological University Dublin. The study has this attempt to targeting different aspects. So one of them is to create new features to a game which was developed by the Technological University Dublin. And this game will hopefully address some aspects of maths anxiety. The second piece is an RCT study, so we are testing at the schools the effects of the games, if they could really improve maths anxiety and reduce maths anxiety and improve maths performance. And for today, I'm just presenting this, the program for teachers, and then we are also almost there. We're already proving the cartoon video we created for children and for teachers. So talking about the teachers' maths anxiety classroom management, which is the program I developed, I had already the honor to present this in a few forums, important ones, like the Institute of Physics during the Maths Week. I was invited also by the Science Foundation Ireland to present this in the Curious Minds Facilitator Workshop. Of course, I had the honor to go to schools and presented this for teachers precisely. And I also presented this at the University of Cambridge and also University College Dublin School of Mathematics and Statistics. And the teachers' maths anxiety classroom management has 4 pillars. So in the first one, we are trying to explain what is maths anxiety. So you saw some of the slides here. In the second piece, we are trying to work about cognitive mechanisms. So I show more information about working memory, other aspects that I didn't present here today. And the third piece, we talk about teachers' anxiety, about teaching mathematics, so what we can do about it. And of course, we finish with interventions for children, for teachers, for changing the classroom environment, and also recommendations for clinical approaches. So to finish up this entirely, I would like just to remind the policy recommendations I included in the article. So first, increasing awareness concerning maths anxiety in children, parents, and teachers. Reducing gender and race stereotypes related to maths learning and maths performance, and also maths examples. So what are the mathematicians we are showing for our kids? I think that's something important. Reinforcing maths learning supports for preschoolers and first graders, because I didn't have the time to show here, but there are research showing that if the preschoolers or the first graders, they have difficulties to understand the mathematical concepts, that could be one of the sources or the causes of maths anxiety. So that's something to change. Avoiding putting students under pressure, and this is not just my idea, but as you can see, in Finland, they have an entire educational system that has no pressure. It starts with 7 years old rather than 6 years old or even earlier. So that's something important to reduce the stress. Cultivating motivation to learn and confidence in students' abilities. Growing self-efficacy and resilience, especially in students from disadvantaged areas. Yes, we need to support students from disadvantaged areas. I will go back to this in the next slide as well. Providing preparation for living certificate with incentives for students from disadvantaged areas. And this is also something that was noted in the PISA study. They observed in the data from Ireland that students from disadvantaged areas, although they were in the 5th quintile, let's say they had higher scores in mathematics, they reported they had no expectations for going to the university. So we are losing great potentials there. Equipping teachers with continuous performance development, like the workshop we developed, offering cognitive and behavioral therapy for severe cases of maths anxiety. This is a big challenge in Ireland because we have problems for doing assessment of kids with any form of specific learning disorder. We do have professionals, competent professionals, but the number of professionals is very small, and the line, the queue, let's say, is long. So sometimes there is a huge delay on those diagnoses, and especially on treatment, and you don't have treatment before diagnosis. So this is an issue. So in summary, just as the last slide already, MAPS anxiety is a global phenomenon. Prevention is needed in early MAPS years. Support must be available for adolescents, and to uproot MAPS anxiety, we need a multi-layered plan. So these are the members of the Originals project, which are collaborating with me, and I'm very grateful for. And I would like to thank you so much for your attention, and for I'm looking forward to hear if you have any questions. Thank you.